In this video I'm going to build a table for my new 14-inch bandsaw. So here's my template for the sub table clamped onto a piece of wood, and I don't want to destroy this template just yet by cutting it out. So to mark the piece of wood I'm just going to punch through all the edges so that I'll know where I have to cut the wood. So I've just punched through all the corners for the bottom side of the table from this template and marked these up on here, and this line here is going to be for inserting the blade, so that cuts all the way through. This is where the insert goes, and then I've got another couple of marks in here. So this here is going to be cut out shallow to give a little bit of room for the pin of this hinge, because I'm actually going to use hinges to tilt this table here and here. And then I've got another funny little cutout here. This is where the table's going to hit the blade guide if it's tilted 45 degrees, so I have to cut out a bit here too. I'm finishing up routing out the slot for the hinge with a router. Here's routing out the ledge for the blade insert. I'm using that green square to guide one side for that ledge at a time. So having routed a straight edge from each side and then chiseling out the corners to make them square, I have a nice ledge to put my blade insert into here. So here's my table and the table mount. So this part's going to be fixed on the bandsaw, and this is the table that tilts. So this tilts like so on hinges, and I'm using hinges here instead of trunnions just to simplify the design. Now on good saws you usually use trunnions to tilt the table, and what trunnions allow the table to do is to tilt about an axis that is level with the top of the table, so that when you tilt the table to the side, this slot doesn't move, and you don't have to do anything about your insert here. It still hits exactly the same spot on the table. But I wanted to simplify this bandsaw by using hinges. Now that means the top of the table moves with respect to the blade, so you need a bigger hole in the insert or a different insert. But I wanted to get the axis of tilt as close as possible to the top of the table, so I actually sunk these hinges in a little bit, and I'm using them inside out so that the axis about which this turns is actually already in the table a bit, so it doesn't move by quite as much. Now on the other side, I added a thing for locking the tilt. I'm going to make a nice knob for this later, but for now I'm just using a wing nut so I can test this thing. So that allows me to lock the table at any angle. Now one thing I did a bit different with this bandsaw is I put the slot for inserting the blade in on the left side instead of the right side where it normally goes, or sometimes on the front. So the reason I put this on the left side is because I wanted that front support to come around the right side, and if the blade had to come out that way I couldn't have that support here. So normally the front trunnion support, or even if it's a hinge, comes in between the blade that comes in here and the wheel here. But because I wanted to bring this table down as far as possible, I really have very little room in here to come out here for a front support arm. So by making the blade come in on this side, I could put the support on here, which also kind of doubles as a stand. And so the only tricky part is getting the blade in and out. But if I run into conflicts, I can always tilt the table and that will give me lots of room to get away from the wheel. But I think I'll be okay without tilting it. So here's the zero clearance insert I just made previously, but I can't use that when I tilt the table. So I made another one with a much bigger hole, and that one I can tilt the table with, and you can see how the blade moves because I don't have trunnions on the saw. So it's a bit of a rough cut because it's kind of a banged up blade. But the cool thing is I did this completely without any blade guides, top or bottom. There is no thrust bearing. The entire push against the blade was taken up by the tracking on the wheel, so it tracks very well.